Hello and welcome to this workshop on decision making with your Splenic Authority. I'm so glad that you made it here today, especially if you have a Splenic Authority, because I have a very clear intention for what I want you to get out of this workshop and this recording. My intention is to help you crack the code of the small, still voice of your spleen, so that you can understand your intuition and make better decisions with your Splenic Authority, so that you can really hear your spleen when it is time for you to make those big important decisions in your life. This workshop is for you if you have, first of all, a Splenic Authority, and if you're still struggling with how you're designed to make decisions through the communication of your spleen. If you're still struggling to understand how your spleen is speaking to you and still wondering if you're really hearing and following what your spleen is guiding you to do. So let's start with some basic spleen characteristics, just to lay the foundation of how the spleen center operates. The spleen center is the oldest and most developed of the awareness centers on the human design body graph. It was our first awareness center. Therefore, it functions in somewhat of a primitive way. The spleen governs the kind of intuition that you can have about what it takes to survive in terms of safety, in terms of health, in terms of well-being, and also in relation to survival in terms of fear. It operates in the now, it informs quietly, and it governs the immune system and the lymph system. It's basically in charge of our feel-good and of our ability to survive and thrive in the world. When you first came into human design, when you first saw your human design chart and maybe got a reading or started doing some research about your design, and you discovered that you have a Splenic Authority, you probably heard that the spleen speaks once and it speaks quietly. So it can be really easy to miss. That's why I call it the small, still voice. So being aware of that information probably didn't help you a lot initially, and you probably felt like this woman in the photo trying to discern what, if that can was connected to her spleen center, what in the world her spleen was trying to tell her, how in the world she could really feel it and really hear it and follow its communication. I really feel like having the Splenic Authority is kind of elusive in a lot of ways. And it takes a special attunement and a refined understanding in the body, not in the head, not in the mind, not in any sort of necessarily mental reasoning capacity, but it takes an attunement in the body to really hear and feel that quiet voice that gently taps you on the shoulder and informs you about a decision you need to make or an action that you need to take. So when we get up in our heads and we're trying to figure it all out, it can very well be like this experience that this woman is having, trying to hear something through this very inadequate mechanism for communication. So in order to get back into the splenic response, to get away from that can to the ear experience of trying to figure it out, let's talk about the language of the spleen. The spleen has a general language, a general talking points, so to speak. The spleen communicates about certain things according to the nature of the way that it functions. So in general, the language of the spleen informs you of timing, act now or not now, in terms of health, healthy, not healthy, in terms of that feel good in your body, you feel good or you don't, in terms of safety, safe or not, and then survival, or in terms of fear as it pertains to survival. So when you're beginning to interpret this language within your body, to interpret the spleen's language of how it speaks to you through your body, it's important to remember first that the spleen does not speak in words. So if you're thinking and hearing words in your head, you know that you're not listening to your splenic response. The spleen's language is felt throughout the body, and that's because the spleen governs the lymphatic system, and the lymph system is a network that runs throughout your body. So some of the things that you may feel when your spleen is speaking to you are the hairs standing up on the back of your head or the hair standing up on your arms. You may actually have other types of sensory experiences like smell or hearing, and we'll get into those more specifically as we dive deeper into the specific ways that the spleen speaks through its gates and channels. But just know that the general language of the spleen does not come with words. It's felt throughout the entire body, as though the lymphatic system, the network of the lymph system, is carrying information through your body, and it's potentially interpreted through some of your senses, like the tactile sense of the hair standing up on your arm, or hearing things as in clairaudience, or even in the sense of smelling. And these senses, like smelling or hearing, are actually more internally experienced and not necessarily always experienced through the way that we think of them as physical senses. And now that we kind of have an overview or a foundation in the spleen's general language and how you can interpret that through your body, let's talk a little bit about decision-making authority. Your decision-making authority is your process for gaining clarity and making good decisions. And it frees your mind up from decision-making, because most of us actually don't get our wisdom, don't get our guidance from what we reason out in our mind. We actually get it from some sort of a cue inside our body. And in terms of the spleen, we get it from how the spleen speaks to us, how the spleen center speaks to us. Decision-making authority is understood in the context of strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about strategy to make sure that we're on the same page about strategy and authority, because this is really the foundation and the backdrop for understanding your splenic authority, for understanding how you make decisions through understanding the language of your spleen center. And in general, your decision-making authority is determined by the hierarchy of your defined centers. And when we get into how you know that you have a splenic authority mechanically on your chart, this is where I'll elaborate a little bit on the hierarchy as it pertains to the spleen center. So having a splenic authority means that you have the spleen center defined. It's colored in, and you have consistent access to the energies of the spleen, and you filter the energies and themes that the spleen deals with and processes in a fixed way. Now here's where the hierarchy comes in. You can have a defined spleen center but not have a splenic authority, and it could be because you either have the emotional solar plexus defined, which is on the right here, or you have the sacral center defined. These two centers, especially the emotional solar plexus, the definition in the emotional solar plexus when it comes to figuring out or understanding what kind of decision-making authority you have, what energy center and types of information you can rely on for your decisions. The emotional solar plexus trumps everything. If you have a fixed sense of emotional energy, if you have a fixed experience with emotional energy, you have to pay attention to that first and get emotional clarity about your decisions. If you have a sacral center defined, either with the emotional solar plexus or even with the spleen center, you have a sacral authority, and you have to rely on your sacral response in the way that either your solar plexus or your spleen bring the timing of your clarity to you. So if your emotional solar plexus is not defined, if your sacral center is not defined, but your spleen center is defined, regardless of the other centers that may be defined in your chart, like the will center or the G center or the head and ajna, for instance, if your spleen center is defined without the sacral or the solar plexus being defined, you have a splenic authority. Now, the quick and easy way to figure that out is to just look on your chart and it will say splenic authority on it, or it will say authority spleen, or authority splenic awareness projected or splenic awareness manifested, meaning that either you're a projector with splenic authority or you're a manifester with splenic authority. So projectors and manifestors can both have the splenic authority. Depending on how you get your chart, if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, you may also see your authority as splenic awareness generated, meaning that you have the sacral center defined and the spleen center defined. Now, in that case, you don't really have the splenic authority. You actually have a sacral authority, meaning that you have to rely on your sacral response to get clarity about your decisions. However, you have the spleen center as your backup system to give you intuitive awareness in the moment about what your sacral center is responding to. So if this is your authority, the splenic awareness generated authority, you can gain a lot from understanding how your spleen center operates. However, go back to your sacral authority and really understand what it means to respond with your sacral. And then once you're tapped into your sacral, you can get clarity about how the spleen informs your sacral from moment to moment. Now that we have that explained, let's review how projectors and manifestors use their splenic authority in conjunction with their strategy. So projectors, your authority is to wait for invitations for the big things in life. And by big things, I mean things that have a big impact on the outcome or the quality of your life, such as long-term relationships that require commitments like marriage or business partnerships or career changes or geographical moves or even having a baby. Those are the things that you want to have a very clear and strong invitation for, because they require energy that you perhaps don't have, or a type of support that you perhaps don't have as a projector, in order for you to fulfill your role in that invitation. However, when you're acting on your own behalf, when there are issues of immediacy in terms of safety, well-being, survival, what's good for your health, what helps you to thrive in the moment, you don't need an invitation for that. You can still use your spleen's communication. You can still listen to your spleen in those times when you don't need an invitation, and that will help you stay healthy and vibrant while you're waiting for those invitations. And then when you get an invitation, you'll know in the moment, you'll know in the now if an invitation is correct for you or not. And you'll know by how your body feels as your spleen informs you of whether or not this is safe, healthy, helps you to thrive, and in general correct for you. If you're a manifester with a splenic authority, you work with your strategy and authority in kind of an opposite way as to most energy types, because you're designed to initiate things. Once you get clarity about what it is that you want to start or initiate or do, then you use your authority to make sure that you can proceed with what you've decided to do in an unencumbered way, so that others don't get angry at you, so that you're not getting angry at others because you've taken action and they're not keeping up. So you know in the moment, your spleen actually speaks to you in the moment as to what's correct for you, what's safe for you, what is good for you to initiate at that point. And then that's when you go and you inform other people who are impacted by your decision about what you're going to do. And that allows them to know what's going on and get out of the way so that you can move forward on what it is that you need to do. And then you go and you take the action. So it's a little bit different, but it still requires you to be tuned into your splenic authority, to be in communication, clear communication with your spleen so that you can get clarity about your actions and your decisions. So now we've laid the groundwork. We've reviewed strategy, authority, we've reviewed how the spleen speaks, and we have a good general understanding of splenic awareness and how it fits into your human design experiment and experience. So now we're going to go into more detail about how to understand your spleen center. We've been taking these little steps and now we're starting to get into deeper water, into a more intimate understanding. And as we go a little bit deeper, we're going to first explore what interferes with your splenic awareness, and then we're going to look at the specific way that your spleen speaks to you. Your spleen has a specific kind of resonance and attunement that's experienced through the definition in your gates and channels, especially in your channels. And when we get into that part, that's where you're going to get a reliable understanding of how you're processing the information through your spleen center that informs you about the correct decisions to make. So what interferes with your splenic awareness? There are two things that interfere with how you pick up on and understand and have clarity about your spleen's communication. The first thing is lack of body awareness, and the second is conditioning. And both of these things can distort how you're picking up and filtering the awareness that comes to you through your spleen. So first, let's talk about lack of body awareness. Splenic awareness is body awareness. It's all about being aware of, taking in, and processing information that keeps your body safe and helps it to survive, about what is healthy for you so that you can survive. And when you ignore your body's messages, you ignore your spleen's messages. So this is where I'm going to encourage you to engage in practices that keep you in touch with your body, practices that maintain your health and that keep you out of your head. So how many times have you sat at your desk engrossed in a project or at your computer with all your attention on Facebook and then looked up hours later and realized that you hadn't eaten, or that maybe you don't feel so good physically? That's because you've gotten up in your head and you've been operating from that space of your mind rather than really doing the things to stay in touch with your body. So anything like physical movement, breath techniques, massage, mindfulness, where you're really paying attention to everything that your body is doing from moment to moment to moment. All of this helps you to stay out of your head, to stay out of the mental processing so that you can really feel your body and so that your splenic response can be heard in that moment. Too much thinking can disconnect you from your body, and ultimately it will lead to poor health. So remember, when you have a defined spleen center and when your spleen is your authority, if you've let things go in your body because you're living up in the space of your mind, ultimately you're going to override the things that you feel in your body because you're not listening, and eventually you're going to kind of break down the whole communication system because your health is suffering. So stay in touch with your body. Even little things like getting up every hour for 5 minutes to walk around and stretch and breathe if you're doing something that's really mental. That will help you to cultivate that trust. Your body will know you're listening. You'll be much more in tune with your body and much more in tune with your splenic response. So the second thing that interferes with splenic awareness is conditioning. And let's just talk a little bit in general about what conditioning is from the perspective of human design. Conditioning can come to you through your undefined centers and undefined gates. So what that means is that anywhere that you have white on your human design chart, in these centers and even in these gates where it's white, that's where you have an inconsistent way of filtering the energy through those centers and gates. And the bottom line is that in those places where you don't have definition, energy comes, energy goes. You can't rely on it. And not only that, but when it's here, when it's in you, when someone brings it to you or the transits bring that energy to you, you take it in, you amplify it, and you potentially distort it, and you get distracted by it. In other words, you start to try to operate from that energy, or you start to try to utilize that energy as though it were always going to be there, and you totally ignore the definition that you have, the energies that you have at your access consistently, which really define who you are and give you the energy to be who you are as you move through your life. So this is primarily what we're dealing with in the first 7 years of deconditioning. So as you follow your strategy and authority, you'll start to see where you're taking in energy and amplifying it and possibly even distorting it through these undefined areas in your chart. And then you'll start to become wise about how that energy is supposed to be used or can be used, and how you or others can work with it in an optimal way. Or in the case of your lack of definition, how you don't have to work with it because it's not yours. You'll begin to realize how you're being distracted or what's distracting you from really trusting, in this case, your spleen center, your splenic authority, because you're over here trying to do something about these other energies that you're taking in from other people that really have nothing to do with your process. A good place to see that is in the emotional solar plexus. And I've experienced this myself through my defined spleen and my undefined emotional solar plexus, and I've worked with a lot of clients who have this dynamic. And what tends to happen when you have the emotional solar plexus undefined and you have a splenic authority or the defined spleen is that you'll feel like you have to do something about these emotions that you're feeling in a very, very strong way. You'll feel like you have to take care of other people and their emotions, and it slows down your process because your spleen is over here telling you or giving you the prompt to act now or to chill out, and yet you're over here being distracted by other people's emotions and wanting to do something about it. So therefore you hesitate sometimes, or the people that I've worked with have hesitated a lot of times to really trust what's going on here in the moment, to trust their spontaneity in the moment, because they don't want to upset someone. They don't want someone to feel bad, because they'll feel bad inside their bodies. And this is a prime example of how conditioning works and how it keeps you from really settling into the spontaneity of your splenic response. Now, you also have the potential to have 7 other centers undefined. So I just want to invite you to be gentle with yourself. This process of deconditioning, especially if you're new to human design, if you just started this process of understanding what this chart is about, understanding how you're designed to make decisions, if you're new to it, or even if you're somewhere midway, know that every 7 years you go through a full cellular turnover. So that's the foundation of this 7-year deconditioning process. And you're not going to have all of the awareness about how you're being conditioned in your open areas, in all of your centers and your white and undefined gates and channels. You're not going to have that awareness all at once. You're not going to have that cellular turnover all at once where you suddenly become grounded in your definition, in the definition of who you are. And you're no longer distracted by all of this openness where you're taking in who other people are. Even if you're further along in your deconditioning process, let's say you've gone through your first 7 years, I really feel like deconditioning is an ongoing process. We're always turning over cells. We're always, if we're doing our own alignment work, our inner alignment work, we're always becoming more true to ourselves. So allow yourself to just relax in this material, because it's going to get technical here in a few minutes. It's going to get really technical. And I just want you to relax and allow yourself to take it in. You have the recording. You can go back through this recording as many times as you want for the next 7 years, for the next 14 years, for the next 3 decades, however long it calls to you, because something new and different will come to your awareness each time that you go through this material. Just allow the things that make your ears perk up, because you have that splenic authority, make your ears perk up right now, to be the things that you pay attention to, and then just let the rest kind of be transmitted into your cellular process and allow it to do its own work over time, so that you can have that in your consciousness for when you need to pull it out and look at another aspect of this dynamic. So just to complete this thought about conditioning, all kinds of forces bring us conditioning. We get conditioned by other people with their definition. We get conditioned by the planetary transits, the gates that are activated through the planetary transits. We even get conditioned by the designs of animals and plants. So you can't escape it. And it's not necessarily bad for you. It's not a bad thing. And when you recognize how it shows up in you, you can start to be a screen and not a sponge. You can start to release it when you recognize it, so that you can return to what you can count on about yourself that's over here in the definition in your chart, in the colored in areas in your chart. Okay, so are you ready to go a little deeper into this material? We're going to spend some time exploring conditioning in the undefined energy centers. So this is where you'll want to take a look at your chart and make note of which centers you have undefined. We're starting at the top, and then we'll just work our way down. The head center, which is this triangle right at the top of the body graph, is the center for inspiration. When you have it undefined, there's a great potential for mental distraction. You may feel pressured to answer other people's questions, because remember that in the undefined centers, you're taking in the energy that other people are radiating out through their definition, or you're taking in energy that's activating your undefined center. So in the head center, you're taking in other people's mental energy. You're amplifying it and potentially distorting it. So you'll feel this pressure to answer other people's questions. You'll feel overwhelmed by that mental energy, or you'll want to act on inspiration that's not even yours. And there's also a tendency here to live out other people's ideas and other people's inspiration. So here's a little story about how someone with a defined head center can be conditioned by the inspiration coming from another person or from another person's ideas. I have a defined head in ajna, and I was at a dinner party once with someone that I hadn't seen in a while. And after the dinner, we were doing dishes and catching up on each other's lives, and she wondered what I was up to. So I told her that I was getting ready to start a certification course. And out of the blue, she got really inspired, and she really felt like that was the thing for her to do as well. Now, I didn't know about her chart at the time, so I didn't realize what was happening. So she signed up for the course and got partway through it and realized that she really didn't want to get this certification. This really wasn't something that she wanted to do. So then we looked at her chart and realized that her head center is undefined, and she's also a manifesting generator, so she can jump into things. She didn't know anything about her strategy. She didn't know anything about her authority. So this was a really good learning moment for her, a good example for her to learn from about how she gets influenced by other people's inspiration and take action on the wrong things when she's not following her own authority. So if you have the undefined head center, just remember that you can get distracted by other people's questions, other people's inspiration, other people's ideas, and your spleen will tell you in the moment, according to your strategy, whether or not this is the thing for you to act on. The next center down is the ajna. This is a center for conceptualization and the way that you think. People with an undefined ajna can be great mind readers, but their thoughts come and their thoughts go, and they're actually a lot of times not even their thoughts. They're other people's thoughts and other people's concepts that are coming and going through the undefined ajna. So you can spend a lot of your energy trying to be certain about ideas and decisions. You can also rigidly hold on to ideas and thoughts, and you can be afraid that people will think you're stupid, so you sort of try to protect yourself by holding on to something that makes it look like you have some certainty and you have some consistency about the way that you think. So there's a tendency here to get distracted by trying to make decisions that bring you mental certainty. And remember, in the beginning we talked about how if you're hearing words in your head, then it's not your spleen. So remember that as you begin to engage your splenic response in a deeper way. If you've heard words, it's too late, and if you're trying to be certain about your decision, then you're up here in your ajna, your undefined ajna, and you're not down here in your body and your spleen. The next center down is the throat center. This is the center for communication and manifestation through action. This is the gearbox of the entire body graph. I always say all roads lead to the throat. In other words, does motorized energy get to the throat for expression and manifestation? Like, does the will center or the emotional solar plexus or the sacral energy or the root get to the throat so that you have the energy to actually take the action to manifest? So if you have the undefined throat, and manifestors, you don't have an undefined throat because you have a motor that goes to your throat. So this piece of information is specifically for projectors. Your undefined throat is going to make it so that you feel pressure to speak. Or if you've been rejected in the past or ignored in the past, you may be afraid to speak. There's a certain amount of inconsistency about how you speak when you have an undefined throat. So if you've said things in the past that didn't come out right, that can also contribute to being afraid to speak. Another dynamic that happens with the undefined throat is that you may try to get attention. Your mental processes or the things that you worry about or focus on are about what you need to do to be seen so that you get attention. And you can also be worried about, or find yourself worried about, what you need to do to manifest an outcome. So again, this energy to manifest an outcome, to take action, or to express yourself always comes when someone else brings you that energy. And when you're concerned about what to do to be seen or what you need to do to manifest an outcome, you're not going to be paying attention necessarily to what's going on with your spleen, because you're looking for the next invitation. You're up in your head and your mental processes, and you're out of touch with your body. This undefined throat and splenic authority dynamic is so important to understand, because projectors can get so desperate for attention or to be heard or to manifest something that we can sometimes kind of fool ourselves about what our splenic authority is actually communicating to us. And as you begin to listen to your splenic authority more deeply, you'll start to understand the quality of the energy that you feel through your spleen when you really get an invitation that's good for you, when you really get that invitation that brings you the energy so that you can speak and be heard and have the attention that you're here to have so that you can fulfill your role and purpose. Next is the undefined G center. This is the center for love, identity, and direction. It's a place where you can compromise yourself or your direction in order to hold on to love. Again, in the undefined centers, the energy comes and the energy goes, and that goes for love as well, or at least that feeling of love can come and go. We're always at our very core deeply loved, and it's kind of up to you, if you have an undefined G center, to find the wellspring of that love within yourself. Otherwise, you will continue to question your lovability when that energy of love is brought to you and then leaves. There's also a tendency when you have the undefined G center to change direction without listening to your authority. And this happens because you take on other people's identities, you take on other people's direction, and sometimes you don't know when you're being you and when you're being or resonating with the identity of someone else or the direction of someone else. So you may find yourself going down paths that really aren't right for you, that really are not healthy for you, because you've immersed yourself or taken in the direction energy and the identity energy of other people or another person. And also, this can happen when you begin to doubt yourself. You can start to change directions because you have that flexibility in your G center to do that when your monkey mind is kind of chattering away and you start to doubt whether or not you're on the right path. You can always rely on the energy of the spleen to give you a certain amount of grounding. So when you can relax into that sense of being calm and grounded, you're not as likely to go off chasing after different directions or chasing after love and then compromising yourself in the process. The next center we're going to look at is the will center or the heart center, the ego center, which is this little diamond just under and to the right of the G center. When the will center is undefined, you may find that you try to prove your worth and value, like you'll work extra hard, you'll make promises that you can't keep because you really want other people to value you. You want to prove that you're worthy. You want to be recognized for your value and your worth. And I've noticed this in my own experience of being around people who have a defined will center. I've sat in their presence and observed the words come out of me like, I can do that, and I can do that too, and I can do that as well. And then I've had to backtrack because I realized that I'm getting really enthusiastic because I'm feeling their will energy and I want them to recognize me as valuable. Another thing that can happen when you have an undefined will center is you have sort of a fluctuating sense of your own ego. You can have an underinflated ego, like you can have self-esteem issues, or you can also fluctuate between having an underinflated ego and an overinflated ego. And this can sort of look like a sense of entitlement or self-righteousness, or an exaggerated sense of humility. So the bottom line here with the undefined will center is that you will try to prove your worth and value at times by making promises or overpromising, and your sense of ego strength and self-esteem could fluctuate. So let's move on to the emotional solar plexus, just down and to the right of the will center. This is a center for emotional awareness. And this is really one of the most dramatic and painful places where conditioning can be experienced, because it is emotional energy that you're taking in and you're amplifying. And you can gain a reputation for being a drama queen because you're feeling emotions that are so strong and powerful in you when you're filtering them from other people, that you can ride higher and lower on their emotional waves than they ever could. This is not easy energy to filter and deal with when you're not emotionally defined. And what could happen is that you will get into a pattern where you start to avoid truth and confrontation because that energy is physically uncomfortable for you. And as we spoke about earlier, you can also begin to avoid spontaneous action when your spleen is actually informing you that this is the thing that you need to do now. And if you're waiting to be sure of how you're going to feel about it, you're never going to be sure about how you feel about it. Just think about this in a mechanical sense. You have an undefined emotional solar plexus. Your emotions aren't really yours. Your emotional experience comes from other people. So they may know how they feel about it after a day or a week or over time. But if you're trying to get emotional clarity, you're never going to get it. The truth is, you're never going to be sure about how you feel about it. And that's just the bottom line. And you're holding up your process because while you're waiting, like someone with an emotional authority, you've already missed the opportunity because it left you in the moment. So you have to move fast when you have the spleen, and the emotional energy that you're filtering can slow you down significantly. Remember that the only thing that you can feel about a decision is the cool, calm, collected energy in the moment. Okay, so we come to the sacral center. The sacral center is a center for work energy and generative and regenerative energy. It's the energy to do sustainable work over and over and over again. And projectors, you know, and perhaps manifestors, you may also suspect, even though you have motors, you don't have a sacral defined, that there is a big tendency to overwork when you have an undefined sacral center. You can be overzealous about getting the work done because you feel like you have all of this sacral work energy in you, and it's very, very amplified because 70% of the people on the planet have sacral energy. So if you're out with people doing work or in the workplace, most likely you're amplifying a lot of sacral energy. And when it gets amplified and distorted, there's this sense of zealousness that sort of carries you along until you collapse. And you can also push yourself to work when you don't want to. So this is a case of ignoring your body's cues, ignoring your spleen, and let's say you got an invitation. Let's say that invitation was for you to stay and work overtime if you're working in a workplace situation, And because you've been amplifying all of this work energy all day and you've become very overzealous in the pursuit of the project that you're doing, you get this invitation and you can ignore your splenic response, which would kind of be like, ugh. I know for me, when I get that feeling that the invitation is really not good or healthy for me, I'll actually feel tired, physically tired. But you can override that. The spleen can override a lot. And you can push yourself to work when it's not healthy for you to do so or when you really don't want to. And on top of that, especially if you're a projector, manifestors probably have it a little more easy because you can initiate. You have the energy to just initiate stopping working and taking a break and going about your business, and you're not really too bothered about it. But for projectors, there's that need for recognition. There's that sense that you want to be recognized, and the way that you know that you're taking in and amplifying this sacral energy that can override your splenic response is that other people will start to recognize you as a good worker. Not that you can't do work, but other people will start to see their work energy in you magnified, and you'll get these compliments about how hard you work and how good of a worker you are and how you're just so valuable to the team. And imagine if you also have an undefined will center, how you can really override your spleen's cues that this is not healthy, this is not good for you right now, and engage in the kind of work which would bring you more of that recognition. Another way that you know that you're being conditioned by sacral energy is when you catch yourself responding to things in your environment. Remember, manifestors, you're initiating, you're an initiator, and projectors, sometimes, a lot of times, for those big things, especially things that involve work, you're waiting for those invitations. And when you catch yourself responding with work energy, doing work because you see something that needs to be done, and you continue to respond to things, you know that you're taking in other people's sacral energy, and you know that you're operating off of it, and then that gets you into this overworking workaholic mode that can very strongly override your splenic response. So let's move to the root. This is our final energy center, undefined energy center, because you all have the spleen defined, of course. The root center is the center for adrenaline pressure and stress. You are not designed to work under pressure and stress when you have an undefined root, although you feel like you can do it, because if you're given an assignment, you're going to want to work at it and work at it because you feel pressurized to get it done. And you're definitely not designed to make decisions when you're feeling pressurized. You're not designed to make decisions from this place of stress or when you're under stress. Let's go back to that feeling of calm, cool, and collected. So when you need to make a decision, that's what you're looking for. That's the resonance you're looking for, you're feeling for in your body, and not the resonance of I'll be free if I get this thing done that they're asking me to do, or I'll be free if I initiate this thing that I think I need to initiate. So if you're feeling the static of stress and pressure, you're overriding your spleen, you're ignoring your spleen. Here are 3 tips for reducing the distractions from the conditioning in your energy centers. Number 1, return to your strategy. That's the foundation. And then number 2, observe the conditioning. So as you follow your strategy and you get into your body awareness, you'll begin to observe things happening. Just like when I was in the company of someone with a defined will center and I caught myself agreeing and promising to do things above and beyond what they were asking. You will start to observe these things happening, these behaviors that you do in reaction to the conditioning, and then you have the opportunity to be a screen and not a sponge. And what I mean by that is that as you take in energy through your undefined areas, you're absorbing it, you're bringing it in, you can get really saturated with it, and you can hold on to it. And just imagine if you had 7 of your energy centers undefined and just 2 of them defined. So you're getting saturated from all of this energy that is not even yours. And then, of course, there's that potential for distortion through all of those experiences of energy, through that whole range, the 7 ways that you can experience energy coming into you. And then you have no truth, you have no clarity because of how much you've taken in and how much you're holding on to. So when you observe conditioning, when you're in that place where you're the observer, especially with the calm, cool, collected feeling that you can ground yourself into through your spleen, you can relax and open up and let go of that energy, discharge it, take the information that you need from that energy and just allow the rest to go. So this is a little bit more advanced, but I just want to throw this out here and introduce it, especially for those of you who really have been in your experiment for a while and you understand the dynamics of your undefined areas and what goes on there in terms of conditioning. I just want to make you aware that not only do you amplify energy in your other undefined energy centers and your undefined gates and channels, but you also have the potential to amplify energy in the undefined gates of the spleen. Like in this particular illustration, it would be the 44 or the gate 50. And you can amplify the energy of the undefined harmonic. Now, the harmonic, if you're not familiar with that term, is the gate that would meet with another gate, that would connect with another gate to make a channel. So when it's undefined, you don't have a whole channel, but you can amplify and distort the energy of the theme that is experienced through the undefined gate of your harmonic. It can be, depending on what else is going on in your design, it can be pretty dramatic when it happens. So when we go into the next level of depth about your splenic authority, we're going to touch briefly on what can happen when you have a defined gate and you have an undefined harmonic gate, because this is something that you can just let percolate and bubble up in your awareness at the right time, so that you understand perhaps how you may not always be able to trust your experience with these hanging gates. Even though the themes you experience are fixed, you can get distracted by the gate that's not defined. That's the harmonic. This is kind of advanced, so bear with me, and if you're at the beginning of just understanding your strategy and the basics of your authority, this is one of those places where you can just let it go and come back to it later. Okay, so now take a deep breath. We're coming into the very deepest aspect of your spleen's consistent language. We've talked about and explored what distracts you from really hearing and feeling your splenic response, really having that deep communication channel open with your spleen. And now we're going to look at your spleen's consistent language, the way that your spleen, at least initially, speaks to you in a consistent way. And that language, that way that you experience your splenic response, comes through the channel or channels that define your spleen center. So on this particular body graph, the 5720 is defined. This whole channel of the 5720 is defined. And when the channel is defined, it defines the 2 centers on either side. The definition of the channel that defines both of the centers and connects the energy between the two centers, fixes the way you process that energy through those centers by way of the themes and the characteristics of that channel. So in other words, in this particular example, if this were your chart and you had the 5720 defined, this whole channel that connects the spleen center with the throat center, it would mean that you have a fixed way of speaking and manifesting through the throat, and more importantly for this workshop, you would have a fixed way of processing the energy and a fixed way of working with your instinct and awareness around the issues of what's healthy, what's the right timing, what's safe, and what's going to contribute to your or someone else's survival. And you could say that this channel here is your primary recognition system. You could say that this is really what you operate on and have a consistent experience of. Now you can also have a fixed experience of these gates that hang off of the spleen center. However, remember how we talked about these undefined gates that would make up the harmonic to the defined gate. And when there's the harmonic that's undefined, you have the potential to amplify and distort that energy. So at least initially, when you're just getting started in understanding this whole conditioning dynamic, you may not necessarily be able to trust what you're feeling or the fixed way that you're processing these hanging gates that come off of your spleen center. So the way that we're going to break this out is through the circuitry of the spleen, through understanding the three different types of circuitry that run through the spleen center. The spleen speaks in a language of awareness, and each type of circuitry has its own way of experiencing awareness. So when you start to integrate that, understand it, integrate it, and let it sink into your body consciousness, you'll get a feel for the nuances of how you're wired up through those channels to receive communication from your spleen. In other words, what you're wired up to recognize and how you recognize it through your body awareness and senses. So there are three types of circuitry that run through the spleen that have the potential to filter splenic energy in a particular way. And I've color coded them here, and as we go through the slides of all of the different channels, the channels will be in the color of the type of circuitry. So there's tribal circuitry, there's individual circuitry, and there's collective circuitry. The tribal circuitry is made up of the 2750 that goes from the sacral center to the spleen, the 5432 from the root to the spleen, and the 4426 from the spleen to the will center. These channels carry awareness about survival of the tribe, passing on the values and fulfilling responsibilities, and also achieving material success. And as we go through each one, you'll kind of understand that they're a little bit different. The 2750 carries a different kind of a tribal awareness and theme than the 5432 and the 4426. So take another deep breath, because we're going to drill a little deeper, starting with the tribal circuitry, and explore each type of circuitry channel by channel. Each channel carries awareness about a specific aspect of the entire circuit's themes. And in this slide, we're going to start with the 2750. If you look at it, let's go back to this slide. You can see that the 5432 and the 4426 kind of surround and enclose this 2750 channel. So visually it looks like the 2750 is in the inner sanctum of all of the survival energy that the spleen carries. And it's sort of surrounded by these two other tribal themes. And then if we go back, we can see that the individual circuitry surrounds and encases the tribal energy, and then the collective circuitry surrounds and encases everything else. So it's almost like this 2750 channel is protected by all of the other gates and channels. It's known as the channel of preservation, and it's about preservation of the tribe. It's about taking on the responsibilities and passing on the values that preserve the survival of the tribe, that preserve the creations of the tribe, and more specifically, if you want to look at it literally, preserving and ensuring that the children that are created through the energy of the sacral have what they need in order to survive to adulthood. So that visual of this channel being so deeply protected sort of gives it this sacred feel, this feel of what it's carrying and transmitting that's so vital to the survival of the human species. So the channel of preservation is about preserving the species. We actually do share this channel with the design of mammals. So it's not just the survival of our species, we as a human tribe, but the mammals, the other mammals on the planet, also carry this energy to preserve their species. So again, it's about the values and responsibilities that support and ensure that the children of the species survive. So we can think about this in human terms, where we're talking about making sure that everybody's fed, making sure that the children are educated, making sure that the values get passed down from generation to generation. But we can even look at this from the animal world and distill it down to a very basic understanding of this channel's attributes. Think of the mama cat and what the mama cat does for her kittens. She teaches her kittens how to hunt. She teaches them where to find food, how to take care of themselves. She even teaches them how to use a litter box and cover up their litter so that predators can't find them and prey on them. That's the essence of the channel of preservation. Now back to the human tribe. Here's how you would experience the channel of preservation, the 2750, or how you could experience this energy. If you have this 2750 defined, you tend to have an instinctual desire to fulfill your responsibilities, and you'll have a resonance with your values or the values of the tribe, and you'll feel this need to pass them on, to teach them, to live by them, and teach the children to live by them. This energy is very much about other people. It's very much about putting the well-being of your family and those closest to you above your own well-being. There's not a lot of thought in this channel about your own preservation, because if the tribe doesn't survive, you don't survive. And as with all channels that come off of the spleen, when you're filtering that energy, there really aren't any words involved. It's not like you're thinking about what you need to pass on or how you need to take care of people. You could have that inspiration up here in your head center, or you could be conceptualizing a recipe to cook and feed your family, or a lesson plan or a sermon to pass on to the people that you want to pick up on the values that you're teaching. But the real crux of this energy is wired from the sacral, which is about action, into the spleen. So the preservation and the instinct doesn't come from any kind of thought about yourself, and really doesn't come from thought at all, like all of the channels of the spleen. It's really more about how you live those values and how you recognize and resonate with values and responsibility. So if you have this channel defined, the way it's going to speak to you is through a recognition and a resonance with taking up responsibilities that preserve the sanctity and the sacredness of the life that's created by the tribe and of the things that are created by the tribe, of all the creations that are made by the tribe. If you have the gate 50 without the gate 27 defined, your potential experience of this hanging gate can be misplaced responsibility, being too nurturing, taking on too much responsibility, or even avoiding responsibility. Remember, you're amplifying and distorting the nurturing aspect of the gate 27, or you can amplify and distort the nurturing aspect of the gate 27. So as you take on too much responsibility, you're possibly getting burned out, you're turning bitter projectors or angry manifestors, and then that's what sets you up to kind of be afraid of responsibility or to want to avoid it. Now, moving on to the 5432, the channel of transformation, the drive for success. This aspect of the tribal circuitry deals with material success, and both the 5432 and the 4426 carry this energy and awareness about what's needed for material success, what is needed to achieve material success so that the tribe survives. So in particular, the 5432 is about transforming ambition, which is in the 54, into fulfillment of potential in the right timing with instinct. And there's a sense of interdependence, or a need for interdependence, for being able to fit in, to climb the corporate ladder. This is the drive and ambition to do the work, to be recognized as an interdependent part of the tribe. And on this side of the chart, in this part of the tribal circuitry, it's most specifically about business or being part of a team. So the 5432 recognizes the timing to act on opportunities to improve your station in life. In the 5432, the energy of the 32 takes the ambition of the 54 and applies instinct and timing to it. There's kind of a conservatism to this. Like, there's ambition in the 54 that wants to climb the corporate ladder, wants to achieve, wants to better itself. And then the gate 32 is sort of the aspect of the energy that says, hold on a minute, let's wait. Let's wait for the right timing. Let's wait to see if we're supported and recognized in a way that helps us achieve success. So when you have this gate as part of your Splenic Authority, you may recognize the timing to act on opportunities to improve your station in life. You'll have this feeling of being recognized as part of the team, and you'll have a resonance with teamwork and achievement. You'll also have a resonance with whether or not it's the right time to transform your ambition into success. If you have the gate 32 without definition in the gate 54, you may feel an inconsistent drive to succeed, because here's the ambition in 54 and it won't be there consistently for you. So you may have times when you feel like you have no ambition, and you may have times when you feel like you have too much, or your sense of ambition is amplified. And the wavering back and forth between no ambition and too much ambition can lead to a fear of failure. So attune yourself to the ebb and flow of success, because this is going to reduce your fear of failure and allow you to kind of settle into trusting your timing. The gate 4426 is the gate of surrender, the transmitter. This is the energy that matches the right people with the right products by sniffing them out and recognizing what can be sold to people. This is the channel of marketing and sales in terms of business. It carries the awareness about how to sell the tribe what it needs. And it's extremely complex, so I'm going to do my best to explain or give you the essence of the feel of this channel. Through the gate 44, which is known in the I Ching as coming to meet, there's an energy about it that's about engaging with others and then being alert to what they need. And then in the experience of the 26, there's the energy for selling. This is about transmitting what is needed by that person so that they can benefit and so that there can be material success. And the 4426 can be experienced through the sense of smell, and it's more than just physical smell. I have the gate 44 defined, and sometimes when I'm doing healing sessions, I can smell things, especially things from the past. For instance, I was doing a session with someone, and all of a sudden I smelled cold cream, like the cold cream that you put on your face. And I asked my client out of the blue, I said, who in your life wore cold cream? And she said, oh, that was my grandmother. She always put cold cream on her face at night. Now, I don't do mediumship work, but when we started to discuss what I was smelling, it really led her into this place where she could go back and heal some of the things from her past that had to do with her grandmother. So the energy of the 44 is attuned to the lessons of the past. And at times, the channel can be intuitively tuned to sniffing things out. Now, on a metaphorical level, being that this is a channel about marketing and sales, it's also about recognizing either how to manipulate people, and that's kind of a word with a negative connotation. So let's use the word persuade. How to persuade people into buying what they need to have so that they survive and so that you get paid and you survive. And it's also about recognizing manipulation. So I have this friend who has the 4426, and she didn't really resonate with that salesman description of being someone who could really make a sale. But when I started talking about recognizing manipulation, she said, oh yeah, I can smell a hustle coming, and it smells like dirty gym socks. So that's how that intuitive sniffer works. It works in a way that is more internal, and you just can either smell dirty gym socks or smell a rat when there's some kind of a manipulation happening. So if you have the 4426 as part of your splenic experience, you may experience it as being able to assess others and their needs, or being able to promote and sell something. That intuitive prompt or that recognition that you have something that someone needs and that you can persuade them to buy it or to buy into it. You may also experience it as a sense of fair exchange, because it's the spleen instinct wired to willpower, to a consistent sense of value and worth. So there will be this consistent sense of exchange that's involved with your recognition, your splenic recognition through this channel. And you'll probably also recognize or have a desire for material security. So you may also recognize what brings you material security through your ability to persuade others or recognize what they need and sell them on it. Now, if you just have the 44, the hanging gate, without the 26 defined, remember you have the potential to amplify the energy of the 26, which is related to willpower. So you may become overcommitted. You may find that as you're amplifying the 26 and the willpower, you overcommit yourself. You make promises that you can't keep. You commit to the wrong people, or you try to prove your worth and value in a way that compromises your integrity. So let's switch gears into individual circuitry. This is another place where there can be a great deal of complexity, so I'm going to attempt to keep it as simple as possible and as pertinent as possible to your splenic authority. There are 4 channels that are connected to the spleen, which are part of the individual circuitry. There's the 3828 down here from the root to the spleen, and then there are what I call the 57s. There's the 5720 from the spleen to the throat. There's the 5710 from the spleen to the G center, and then this is a generated channel, so we're not really going to talk about it in this workshop, but there's also the 3457, which goes from the sacral center to the spleen. So in a nutshell, this circuitry, this individual circuitry that's connected and wired into the spleen center, is about either engaging in the right struggles or following your spontaneous intuition. There's a lot of potential for mutation through these channels, or for change through these channels, when you really stay true to yourself and you stay true to your sense of spontaneity. So let's start with the 3828 channel from the root to the spleen. This is the channel of struggle, or it's also known as the game player. So again, that sense of spontaneity really comes in through this channel by the experience of life as a game, life as something that gives you meaning. And the awareness that can be experienced through the 3828 is awareness about what's worth struggling for. So the more meaningful the game of life, the more meaningful the struggle, the more you are able to tap into that intuitive, in the moment prompt that alerts you to the right actions at the right time. There can also be a tremendous amount of resistance in your life when you have the 3828 defined. If you have this defined, you're not afraid to take the hard road if it has meaning for you. You're not afraid to struggle. You're not afraid to dig your heels in and fight when there's something worth fighting for. So your strategy really helps you to pick your battles wisely. It helps you to discern what's meaningful for you as an individual. This energy in the individual circuit is primarily concerned with your individual survival, in contrast to what we just talked about the tribe survival. So everything that we're talking about through the 3828 channel or the other individual channels in this circuitry has to do with survival of the self. And that's what the struggle is about. That's what playing the game of life is about as you embody this theme of the 3828. So in order to release that resistance that can really build up when you're just struggling to struggle, follow your strategy and you will get so much more clarity about which struggles are really for you to engage in. Now, this aspect of the circuitry, the 3828, is part of the knowing circuit, or the knowing sub-circuit. So that would come straight up the center here, and then also it would include the 5720 on this side of the chart. So when you have the knowing sub-circuit in your design, you know that you know things, but you don't know how you know it. And that knowing that's filtered through the spleen, that you experience through the spleen in this case, is very much spontaneously in the moment. So if you have the 3828, you have this natural spontaneous zest for life. And as I mentioned before, you're not afraid of a challenge. And also your intuition, the way that this channel speaks to you, or the way that your spleen speaks to you through this channel, is auditory. So you hear a vibe, you hear a vibration, and if you're really honoring it, if you're really tapped into it and you're really hearing it, you can recognize that this is something worth fighting for. This is something that adds to your zest for life. This is something that is worth the struggle and worth playing at in the moment. And even though you have the recognition, you may not know how you know that this is the thing for you to do. But you can always trust the vibe. You can always trust what you feel, and you can always trust what you hear that enlivens your zest for life. Now, if you have the gate 28 without the gate 38 defined, so it's hanging off of the spleen, you may have a tendency to struggle unnecessarily, to engage in unnecessary struggle. You may struggle without purpose, and there may be a lot of adversity in your struggle, and you may end up fighting against life. So instead of really embodying that zest for life, that zest that comes from following your splenic response, from hearing that knowing in your body, you may dig your heels in and actually resist life instead. Now, there's also the potential for fear in the gate 28 that can add to this struggling without purpose and this adversity in your struggle, because sometimes, especially when you have this hanging gate, you may actually be struggling because somehow you feel that the meaning in your life is about struggle instead of the struggles that you engage in being meaningful to you. So let's move into the aspect of the individual circuitry that comes out of the gate 57. I like to call these the 57 channels, or the 57s. The gate 57 is about intuitive insight. It's about having intuition in the moment, intuitive insight now. And these two channels that we're going to talk about embody the intuitive awareness about survival of the self in the now. So we're going to look at the 5710 and the 5720. The 5710 goes from the spleen to the G center, the center of self, with the gate 10, which is the gate of the self. So it's about how to be yourself now. And the channel 5720 goes from the spleen, the intuitive insight in the spleen, to the throat center with the gate 20. So it's about expressing or taking action now in the moment. We'll start with the 5710, which is a channel of perfected form. We actually share this channel with the plant kingdom. So I think this title of perfected form is such a beautiful backdrop to how we're going to explore this. Think of a rose and how a rose doesn't do anything. A rose doesn't need to do anything, but a rose knows how to grow or how to be itself from moment to moment to moment. And there's this beautiful unfolding and this beautiful blooming that happens with a rose, or really with any flower. And there's an artfulness to a rose's survival. And as the rose unfolds and blooms, it's sort of perfecting itself. And when it perfects itself through its own blooming, it actually kind of brings beauty and order into its environment. I mean, that's why we have roses in our house. That's why roses are in flower arrangements, or that's why we have flower arrangements in general, because of this perfection of form that sort of brings in an order and a beauty that wasn't already there. So when a person who has the perfected form channel is really living fully in the moment, there's no decision that really has to be made. It's just a sense of spontaneous being that has to happen. They can live by a sense of spontaneous being. And there's a grace to people who have this channel. I know quite a few designers and artists and creative people who have perfected form. And there's just a sense about them where they bring their mutative presence into whatever they're working with, and it creates a beauty that wasn't there before. And it's usually a beauty that's kind of unique, that's kind of different, and changes things for the people that they are around. So there's nothing that the person with the 5710 has to do in order to come to this awareness. And it's an awareness about behavior, about their behavior that ensures their survival. So I don't know if the rose has that kind of consciousness like a person with the 5710 would have. But let's say that the rose does. Let's anthropomorphize the rose. So the rose would know how to bloom, what color the petals need to be, how much to open up, what to smell like, in order for it to be able to attract the right insects, the right pollinators, the right bees, so that it can continue to survive. So let's put this in human terms. Someone with the 5710 is aware of how to interact with others in a way that preserves or ensures their survival and their health. And it's a way that's intrinsically wired into beauty. So there's an imperative here, if you have the 5710, to live authentically as yourself, to just be yourself, and to show up as yourself in the moment, in each moment. And when you're living authentically, you have this deep spontaneous attunement to order in your environment. It's like you are tuned in and tapped in to the intuition that brings about a better order, a higher level of beauty, and an organization that flows. When you have this as part of your splenic communication system, you recognize your own beingness, how being in your environment as you brings you beauty, health, and ultimately survival. So you have a resonance with beauty and order. When you're going to make decisions, when you need to make decisions through your Splenic Authority, your decisions will be in alignment with how you appreciate and express your uniqueness. So if you really are expressing and being you, then your decisions are going to align with that. Your decisions are going to support the expression of you. And if for some reason you're kind of hiding, that alignment may not be as strong. So it's really important for you to kind of bloom where you are, for you to accept that all you have to do is be, and not get distracted by whatever else is undefined in your chart, and just live in your uniqueness. And by living in your uniqueness, you actually empower other people and reorder other people in your environment to have more health and beauty. You're sensitive to sound, as is with all of the individual circuitry. And I'm just bringing this out here, but it's actually an attribute throughout the individual circuitry. That sound vibration that you pick up intuitively may actually be coming through your right ear. So if you have the gate 57 without the gate 10 defined, you could experience a fear of the future. And this fear of the future will distract you from staying in the present moment. Like, you'll know what you know, but you don't know how you know it, because that's how the knowing circuit works. And because you know it and you can't prove it, you could project fear about what will happen in the future if you actually live it. In this case, through the gate 10, if you actually step out and step into your full self-empowerment. So this could also lead you to become kind of self-denying, depending on what other conditioning you have in your chart, or because your experience of the gate 10 is inconsistent, you could waver between self-denying and overindulgent. And you may also struggle with behaving in an empowered way. So let's move to the 5720 channel. This is known as the brain wave. When you have the 5720, there's an awareness about what to do without thinking about it. So the 57 brings that intuitive insight together with contemplation in the now in the 20, and there is the ability to have deep penetrating awarenesses and awakenings. And these awarenesses and awakenings can affect and change other people. All of the individual circuitry can change other people when you're really fully living in it as yourself. You have any of the individual circuitry and you're truly being yourself without concern for how it affects other people. You change other people. You mutate other people. So this channel of the brainwave pumps this intuitive, in the moment insight up to the throat. And of course, the throat is about speaking and acting. It can also be known as the I am channel, the I am now channel. So you have an awareness of what to do without thinking about it. It really kind of goes so quickly that it can be more like doing it without thinking about it, acting on that impulse in the moment. And again, it's auditory. It's the vibrational frequency that prompts you to take that action in the moment, or prompts you to speak up in the moment, to express something in the moment. So let's use an example from the animal kingdom about how this energy moves or how it acts and reacts. Imagine that you're a gazelle at the watering hole on the plains of Africa, and it's been a really hot day and you came across this watering hole and you're standing there rehydrating. You're standing there drinking water with your hoofs on the ground and deeply attuned to what you're feeling and hearing through your hoofs that would alert you to danger. So off in the grass, there's a lion who spots you at the watering hole, and as the lion begins to come up closer to you, begins to stalk you, you hear or feel that vibration in your body. So if you have the 5720 as part of your splenic awareness system, part of your splenic authority, you'll have these pulses and waves of instinct that move through your body, and a sense of presence that goes beyond words. And then there's that sensitivity again that can possibly be experienced through the right ear, or maybe through your hoofs. I don't know. So if you have that, you're exceptionally attuned to the vibrations that would spring your instincts into motion at just the right time so that the right thing comes out of your mouth, or the right impulse happens to keep you safe. The right action happens to keep you safe. So if you have the gate 57 without the defined gate 20, again, there may be an experience of fear of the future. You may struggle with trusting what you instinctively know. You know what you know through the 57, but you don't know how you know it, but you know it in the moment. And if you hesitate because of conditioning, or because you're struggling to express or act on your hunches, then you're going to continue to struggle to trust that instinct. And you might be out of touch with the timing of action or expression. So we've worked our way from the inner sanctum of the tribal circuitry and moved out from the individual circuitry, and we're now ready to explore the collective circuitry, the collective channels that run through the spleen. The collective channels are the 5818 from the root to the spleen, and the 4816 from the spleen to the throat. There's awareness about logical patterns that provide solutions to society. So the subcircuit here is the circuit of logic. So these channels are about recognizing, correcting, and perfecting patterns, and also mastering and sharing skills. So logic is about understanding, and this is also called the understanding circuitry. So it's concerned with understanding patterns in a logical way. There's repetition in these channels, or the need to repeat things over and over to understand what's really going on, and then to, of course, master and perfect it. The 5818 that runs from the root to the spleen carries the awareness of patterns that lead to more joy. So in the 58 we've got joy. We've got the impulse for joy, for society to have joy. These outer channels, let's go back to this one. These outer channels of collective circuitry are concerned with society. This energy is not personal. It's not the up-close personal energy that is concerned with the tribe. And it's not the personal type of energy that is embodied by the individual circuitry that's concerned with the self. It's about the bigger picture of what's good for the whole, what's good for society. When you have the 5818, you have an ability to make a judgment about what needs to be corrected in a pattern to have a joyful outcome, so that everyone has a joyful outcome. So this channel is about sharing the joy of improvement, about testing out things and perfecting things and spotting patterns that can bring about improvement, and there's an inherent joy in that. It's kind of like the joy that comes when you're working a puzzle and all the pieces are snapping together, and right at the very end you've got those last few pieces and you snap that last piece in and there's this sense of joy. Or if you've ever worked a Rubik's Cube and you get all of the colors to line up on all of the sides of the Rubik's Cube, you've engaged in this logical process to correct those patterns, and then you have this joy. That's the kind of joy that's experienced in the 5818. And because it's collective, there's a need to share. There's a need to share the correction. So using the working out the puzzle or the Rubik's Cube example, the person with the 5818 may actually be the one standing on the outside offering the corrections, put this here, do this there, so that it can all come together for the highest good of all. So I also call this circuitry on this side, both the 5818 and the 4816, the highest good of all channel, because it's concerned with sharing things so that all people benefit. The 5818 is known as the channel of judgment. So if you have this channel, you will often have a full body recognition in the moment when your spleen speaks. It's kind of like a lighting up in the moment. And it feels something like things line up or slide into place. I have this channel defined in my chart, and for me it almost feels like that last puzzle piece experience. Like when I get an invitation as a projector, and it's a correct invitation, something slides into place, the plug goes into the right outlet, and my body lights up, or the last puzzle piece goes in, and there's this recognition. And it feels like a sense of joy. It happens very quickly, it happens in the moment, and when it does happen, there's no hesitation about accepting that invitation. So I've had a recent experience with this 5818 channel that may help you if your splenic authority is experienced through the 5818. For about the past 5 months or so, I've been getting these potential opportunities for doing my work, doing this work in another part of the country, a specific part of the country, a specific city. And people have given me suggestions. They have tried to hook me up with other people in that city, and the energy just never seemed to be quite potent enough. Like it just never lined up. Nothing really slid into place. Things were sort of lukewarm for me. And I decided just to let it go because it just felt to me like I was getting these puzzle pieces, but they were the pieces to the wrong puzzle or something. It just didn't fit in. So I decided I'll just let this go, and I didn't really think too much about it. And then by a series of other connections that I have, I got introduced to somebody new. And in our conversation, all of a sudden, out of the blue, she invited me to come and do a workshop at her center in that city. That's when something slid into place. That puzzle piece was right. It clicked right in. My body lit up, and I accepted the invitation without even a thought. And there was this full body feeling of joy when that happened. So that's how fast the splenic response can be. But I also want to point out here that it happened over time. Like it happened because I was repetitively entertaining the opportunity. Like I got the inspiration that I really felt like I needed to be there. I wanted to be there. And from there, the opportunities started coming, but it's like I had to try this one out. I had to test that one. I had to test the feel of this one. And then finally, when I sort of had a feel for how all the other ones felt or didn't feel like the right thing snapped into place. So if you have the gate 18 without the defined gate 58, there can be a tendency to have perfectionism and fall into fault finding, because what you're amplifying is this energy for joy, this desire or this impulse for joy. So when the joy is absent, when the energy is absent, there can be this over correction behavior that comes from the 18. The gate 18 is the gate of correction. So there can be this tendency to want to find fault and want to correct things because you're reaching for that joy. And you can also experience this with the entire channel, this fault finding and perfectionism and all of that. So what I like to say about this whole dynamic here is that corrections and judgment are for systems and not for people. So if you're correcting people, the energy is not being used in the optimal way. If you're fault finding and you're nitpicking, it could be because you're feeling this insecurity from not having access to the energy for joy. Okay, so we're at the last channel that's associated with the spleen center. This is the 4816, the wavelength or the channel of talent. The 4816 has awareness about solutions to problems that improve people's lives or that improve society. Remember, this is still part of the collective circuitry that's all about the highest good of all, the logical perfection and mastery of things that bring improvement to society. So the 4816 takes the understanding of what needs to be corrected that comes from the 5818 and refines it through repetition, masters it, and then shares it through the throat center. So this channel turns talent into mastery with practice. Remember that this is logic that we're talking about, so there's practice and repetition that's involved in the experience of this energy. So once the talent is mastered through practice, then it can be shared with enthusiasm. The gate 16 is the gate of enthusiasm. Because it's collective, it's not personal. And we talked about that when we talked about the 5818, that this is very much about being concerned with the masses or with society or perhaps the highest good of all. The sense that can be associated with this channel, or specifically with the gate 48, is the sense of taste And this can either be the physical sense of taste, or it could be the taste from an artful or designing perspective. So people who have the gate 48 in particular can have this intuitive understanding about beauty and design that's rooted in that sense of logic. So it's kind of woven into the fabric of what this person with this energy is working to perfect and master. If you have the 4816, you can recognize a solution to a problem. So through your logical process and your drive to master and understand, remember this is also known as the understanding circuit, you'll recognize and see things that can be done to solve problems in the greater whole. You also recognize opportunities to master your talents. Like you can recognize what you would need in terms of support to really be able to go deep, because the gate 48 is the gate of depth, to go deep into what you need to study, what you need to learn, so that you can really bring that talent out and share it. Another thing that you recognize, especially if you're a projector and this is part of your decision-making process, you can recognize when you're being recognized for your talents. So this is really great if you're a projector, because when someone invites you, you will have a resonance with that invitation if it's really in alignment with the expression of your talents, if it's really in alignment with who you are and what you're here to share. And then of course, because the 48 is wired into that sense of smell, you may have a recognition of what's in good taste. And I see this taste aspect of this channel kind of like a golden thread that's woven into the tapestry of the awareness in the 4816 experience. So it sort of weaves its way through, and you will have this body sense that lights up when you are experiencing beauty, or when a design comes together, or when something actually tastes good to you. So we talked a lot about the characteristics of the collective circuitry when we talked about the 5818. So I'm not going to repeat all of those. I'm just going to add here that this is a place, when you have the 4816, this is a place where you really get to go deep into what it is that you're kind of designed or called to master or called to work with. And when you actually really get through that, when you really dive into that and work with it over and over again with the right kind of support, which also includes financial support, then you bring your talent together with the work that you apply to it. Then you sort of transcend the talent so that what you have to offer becomes way bigger than just raw talent or hard work. Now, if you have the gate 48 without the gate 16, if you have the hanging gate 48, you can have a fear of inadequacy, like you're never ever prepared. Because remember, you don't have a consistent experience of the 16, the actual gate that gets this energy up to the throat for expression, that gets your solutions up that have been time tested and worked out up to the throat for expression and to fully be able to share it. So you may spend a lot of time in this place of getting prepared, of studying, of being the perpetual student, and feeling like you just never quite have it together enough to be able to get it up and out and share it. But usually what happens is that you're actually over-prepared. You're over-prepared, you know more than anyone else because you've studied more deeply than anyone else around. And when it's time and the right energy is available, you can share something that is so full of depth and infused with your deep sense of understanding that it goes above and beyond anything that anyone else has created that's similar. So the other aspect of having inconsistent access to the gate 16 is that you can also be overly enthusiastic. Now, there's no motorized energy for getting this talent and mastery up to the throat. So you still have to wait. Even if you are another energy type, you still have to kind of wait in order to bring this out. So without the 16, you may be amplifying enthusiasm and want to jump ahead or feel sort of pressured to jump ahead before you're actually really ready to, before you've actually fully lived the depth in the gate 48. And there may also be this sense of feeling like you might not be able to share your solution because you don't have the throat aspect, you don't have the 16 that connects to the throat. So you may struggle to share your solution, and that may be another reason why you may stay in the well. The gate 48 in the I Ching is known as the well. So when you're resonating with the fear of inadequacy, I call that falling down the well of your drive to be overly prepared and your struggle to find and share solutions. So take another deep breath. We have looked at all of the channels and gates of the spleen center, and I hope that you have gotten what you need to begin to really understand how your spleen speaks to you. So I just want to leave you with some parting thoughts about how you can become more in tune with your spleen specific language. And let me just preface this by reminding you that we really went into the deep end. I actually do have the gate 48 without the gate 16. So I know that I shared a lot with you, and a lot of it, especially when it came to the channels, was pretty in depth. And I just want to remind you that you don't have to get all of this at once. This is your recording to have for life, and when you need to come back to it and be attuned to another or a deeper level of insight into your spleen's language, please pull this up again and listen to it, and just be easy and soft and light about this. So let's just review some of the basics that are going to generally help you get in touch with your splenic energy and your splenic response. You always want to start by observing the basics. You want to follow your strategy. You want to practice impeccable self-care so that your body stays healthy and so that you can stay in tune with your body. And you want to engage in practices that help you to be in your body. So even if you find that you're really kind of intellectual, or you're still in that process where the monkey mind or the mind chatter kind of governs your life, if you're spending a lot of time in your head, I really want to encourage you to start to create a routine or a practice around some sort of body awareness activity. And then let these insights integrate. Just take your time and let these insights integrate. You took in a whole lot by going through this lesson and listening to this recording, and it will take time for things to bubble up. It will take time for the vibration of this energy to kind of sink in and take hold. Even though that takes time, we know that your splenic response doesn't take time. So when your spleen speaks to you, immediately acknowledge it and take the appropriate action. The more that you can give yourself that space to be spontaneous with your spleen's prompts, the more you're going to build that trust with yourself, so that when you do have to make big decisions, you'll have a very close and intimate relationship with your splenic energy. And I just want to leave you with this one last thought. if you feel like you have cultivated a lot of body awareness and you've really given yourself that breathing room to be spontaneous, and you acknowledge and act on your spontaneity in the moment, but when you are using your strategy, you're still feeling like there's no splenic response, like you're not being able to feel your spleen, it could be that the timing isn't right. Or it could be that your spleen's recognition system is specifically or particularly wired to safety. And this may not be an issue of safety. So if there's no response, it usually means it's not time, or that it's not unsafe. So just keep that in mind as you move forward. So that's it for the Splenic Authority workshop. I really appreciate that you have joined me for this, and I wish you all the best for your human design journey. And it has been a real honor and pleasure to assist you in becoming more attuned to your spleen.